At the end of my Helldivers kill team video, I mentioned they had a lot of potential for being spun out into an army, and one unit idea I had was of an exosuit made from a Sentinel. While there's been some issues with the game itself, I'm not one to pass up the chance to make a mech. Now, something like the Ballistus Dreadnought might have also worked, though it may be close to one of the Automaton Hulks, but an armoured Sentinel matches the general style of a small one-person mech for some armoured support, and is also from the same army as the kasrkin. So the general design language of the kits are generally the same, as well as it being an easy inclusion in the army rules-wise. Like my kasrkin, I wanted it to be a simple build, keeping to the main kit as much as possible, which worked out pretty well, and makes it easily replicable if you want to try it yourself. To start off, I just assembled the most basic version of the chest, and started to look at the legs and hips to see what changes I need to make. Fortunately, the general default positioning of it all loosely matched enough with the exosuit, but one thing I noticed I need to change is the height and size of the legs. The Sentinel is quite tall, with the legs being a big part of the model, but with the exosuit the main body sits close to the ground, with the legs being a less important part. They do have the same type of leg structure, the kind of 3-part reverse knee legs, and I didn't want to heavily rebuild the legs to keep the build simple, so I tried to work with the existing ones. I removed all the lock-in points of the legs, where they're normally glued together, cutting off or drilling them off, so all the joints were loose and I had more freedom in posing them. And so to try and de-emphasise the legs and make the model shorter, I glued the legs as curled up and contracted as I could fit. Along with a Necron model to act as a downed automaton under its foot, that was the pose and the basic body sorted. So I glued on most of the leg armour and moved on to the next area that needed a change: the arms, or lack thereof. Instead of having the weapons mounted on the front like they normally are on the Sentinel, I plan to place them further back and up, like the exosuit's arms. I just needed to make a kind of upper arm or shoulder to place them under. The hip armour I didn't use for the legs would make for some perfect shoulder armour. I just need an appropriately sized box type of piece to put them on. I used weapon bodies cut from some Storm Raven guns that I had spare, but looking back on it, the weapon bodies from some of the Sentinel's own weapons could be used to keep it all to the main kit. For the main weapon itself, any of the Sentinel's options could work, but I wanted something like the exosuit's Gatling, so I used the front half of the multi-laser weapon for the multiple barrels, and for the back I used the autocannon weapon option's body since it has the circular ammo drum. To match the other Patriot exosuit's weapon, I used the Sentinel's missile launcher for the other side. It's not a perfect match, since the Sentinel's option is round compared to the exosuit's boxier launcher, but I'm trying to keep it all to the Sentinel kit for the most part, and it is the same weapon type at least. With the arms sorted, I plan to connect them to the back of the Sentinel's body, where some different detail pieces could normally be added. However, the bottom of the Gatling got in the way of the upper legs, and it also got in the way of the sides of the windows of the Sentinel's cockpit, and left the overall silhouette of the shoulders a bit too narrow. Fortunately, the Sentinel kit also came with some parts that I could use for an easy fix. Ammo crates that can normally be added to the back area of the Sentinel could space the shoulders out. I just trimmed some of the front details and altered the connection port a little so I could glue them on a little higher up than they would normally go. Then I magnetised the arm parts to finally connect it. With the main parts of the building done, I got to detailing, which I didn't need to do a lot of since the build is just rearranging already detailed parts. I used some elbow covers cut from the Sentinel's chainsaw arm to cover the holes where the weapons are normally mounted on the front. I added the antenna, since that's part of the Sentinel kit that matches some exosuit details, and also to match the exosuit, I cut the handles off the shoulder panels to add them to the front thigh armour. And for one final touch, I gave it an autocannon to partially match the Emancipator version of the exosuit, and also since the Sentinel does have an autocannon option. I just used the AdMech Ironstrider's autocannon, which are also the same bits I used for the on-foot Helldiver autocannon weapon. It already scaled well, so barely needed any changes to use on the Sentinel. I just glued a few magnets onto the back, so along with mirroring what I did for the right shoulder, the autocannon can be equipped on both sides, and that completed the building. Given this was to show my Helldivers, I went with the same paint scheme, which would be like the Patriot exosuit, instead of the more yellow Emancipator. I just went through pretty much the same process I did for my kill team, starting with a black prime and building up a few layers of broad highlights to make up for the fact black can't properly be shaded. On top of the Chaos Black Spray Can Prime, I heavily dry brushed Corvus Black all over. Then I dry brushed Eshin Grey on the model, this time focused on the more upper and upwards facing areas. And finally a light dry brush of Dawnstone Grey, just around the parts of the model that stick out the most, like the upper edges and using only downward brush strokes. With the main colour done, the next biggest one was silver, which I used the dark silver paint Iron Warriors for. I just picked out certain mechanical details, like some of the leg joints, the antenna, exhausts, weapon barrels, handles and rivets. After that I took a look at what yellow parts there were, and there weren't many on the Exosuit, but I did notice the hazard stripes around the knees, which would be a neat detail to add. Along with a few other small parts, I painted some lines already built on the right knee with Avalon Sunset, and for its left knee I used thin strips of masking tape to block out the areas for the stripes, which I then stippled on with a dry brush. Then the last few spots to paint were some very small bits, like Corendras green over the optic below the front viewing slot, Rakarth flesh for the Automata's bone face, and Blood Angel's red for its eyes. Since the main black of the model was already kind of shaded from the dry brushing, all I did with washes was use Army Painter's dark tone over the silver and yellow areas. And like the paint scheme, this model's base was to match the Helldivers, so I used Astrogranite texture paint for a grey dirt, shaded with a mix of Army Painter's dark tone and Tooth & Coats' Tempest blue wash. I highlighted it with a dry brush of Dawnstone, and at that point I pinned the model to the base and then detailed it with some alien florets and burnt grass tufts from Gamer's Grass, as well as lightly dry brushing Mephiston red for a light Necron eye glow. Then it was just the finishing touches of some edge highlighting on the Exosuit itself. I used Dawnstone on most edges, with Administratum Grey for the most upper edges and corners, and I used Surcoat Silver to highlight the metal, and the original Avalon Sunset just to highlight a few spots of yellow. And that's how I built a Sentinel to match my Helldivers. It's a pretty simple conversion since it mostly just uses one small kit, and I'd recommend trying it out if you want to add some variety to a guard army, or just want to get into kit bashing yourself. Thanks for watching. Consider liking and subscribing, and if you want to directly support me, I now have a Patreon. I'm still setting it up and figuring it out, but let me know what kind of stuff you'd want to see from me on there.